antenna correction duty,
Right.
because it felt like you're a warrior, and then you are, because you are the savior of all, you are going to give entertainment to everybody. It was so much of fun. Even the advertisement films, I remember one day crooning all the advertisement films which I had seen in
Yes.
in the early 90s.
And it seems that to stroll in Chandni Chowk is to be perpetually in the past.
Right.
As if it has no coordinates in the present. As if it exists now because it also existed some point in the past. How do you relate to Chandni Chowk?
These poems I've been writing for ages now, because I remember the first poem from this anthology I wrote when I was in college. And the first major poem, which was on the theme of feminism, was when I was appearing for the UPSC interview.
Okay.
So that night gave asylum to the mother of 5. Thus the Kshatriyas settled with us, with royal sophistication at bay. But at least they were safe here. My mother-in-law mulled each day.
Hello and welcome to Likhawat. I am Gautam, Choubey, your host, and this is a show about the books of Bharat. The book this week is an anthology of poetry, Her Story, by bureaucrat and poet and a post-colonial theorist, Neha Bansal. And joining us in the studio to discuss the book is the poet herself, Neha Bansal. Neha ji, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
Neha ji, you specialize in post-colonial theory,
Right.
and you've also taught in a college for a while.
Hmm.
Take us through your journey from being a person of the world of ideas to now you're a bureaucrat, a world
Yes.
of action.
So, Gautam ji, I was very lucky that I had the right guidance to take up the specialization, which really opened my eyes to the world. So I realized the first thing that I learned was that how binaries exist, whether it is the financial prosperity or gender or race or even social class.
Right.
And caste in India is another area. So when I started studying this, I realized that there is just so much of politics on it,
Right.
and there is only voice of the people who matter.
Right.
The people who are
On the periphery.
or on the periphery, yes, would be silenced.
Right.
So my agenda was to give the voice to these silenced people. So
That inspired you to become a civil servant?
yes, of course, and that also inspired me to write my first book, which was Her Story, which was a gender-sensitive anthology.
Right.
So it contains 39 verse poems
Yes.
and verse narratives, I would call them, and there are 39 stories, right from mythology and characters from our Hindu tradition to every woman,
Right.
basically, who is on the road, who is a housewife, who is a prostitute, who is
Right.
probably any woman,
Right.
So all these 39 verse narratives are about that. And then sometimes we see that this post-colonial discourse also talked about double colonization. So I realized that there are women not only who are discriminated against on the basis of gender,
Right.
but if class, social class, and racial discrimination is added to it, then it could be a double whammy.
Return to your first anthology, Her Story, but then there's another wonderful book, Six of Cups, another anthology of poetry. There's a poem on Doordarshan, and I find it very interesting because these days when we speak of Doordarshan, we speak of it as if it's a thing of the past.
Yes.
In fact, I also remember एक film आई थी, इसका शीर्षक था, नाम था दूर के दर्शन.
Right.
So why is it that Doordarshan evokes such nostalgia, even though the channel is still around and it
Yes.
broadcasts far and wide in the country?
Actually, at that point of time, Doordarshan was the only thing.
Right.
And at that time, we were not numbed by I use the word sheer plantitude,
Right.
sheer surfeit of things. There was there's so much of entertainment now that people have become so irritable, and they become so impatient. Now it is a time for that 30 seconds reel. So people want entertainment in those 30 seconds.
Right.
So now earlier we used to wait for days for that next episode.
Even
for the-
Krishi Darshan mattered.
Yeah, Krishi Darshan, totally. I remember sitting, I've got nothing to do with agriculture, but I remember sitting there and watching it because there was nothing else. And it improved my general knowledge so much.
Absolutely.
So much I got to know about it. So I remember when we were young and there were hardly any colored TVs, so all the neighborhood would come to a house, making it an impromptu potluck party. and they would bring in a lot of dishes because they would be, that was their way of thanking us for letting us watch, letting them watch TV, epics on our TV.
Right.
And it was so much of fun. We used to really enjoy our antenna correction TV, antenna correction duty, because it felt like you're a warrior, and then you are, because you are the savior of all, you are going to give entertainment to everybody. It was so much of fun. Even the advertisement films, I remember one day crooning all the advertisement films which I had seen in in the early 90s, and the songs, jingles.
Right.
It was so much of fun to watch them.
Why don't you read a little from that poem?
Oh, I would love to. Thank you. So the poem is called Good Old Doordarshan. The present generation, deluged with the sheer plentitude of mind-numbing options, would perhaps never know the excitement of waiting with bated breaths for the entertainment that came in small doses. When the antenna correction duty was as exciting as a warrior going to the war to set all the wrongs right. When the spate of advertising films irritated but tantalized us as we crooned the jingles throughout the day. When Ramayana united the motley neighborhood and a house filled with dahi bhalla, jackfruit curry, rajma chawal and idli dosa, carrying the subtle gratitude of the TV watchers who thronged our home to watch the epics on a new color TV. When Roo Afza and Nimbu Pani were drunk in copious quantities, as the audience argued over the correct course of action for the helpless Pandavas, when the films were a rare treat and we wrote little postcards requesting for our favorites, hoping fervently that our prayers would be heard. But the most beautiful memory was to be wanting to watch it together with everyone, day after day, week after week, unlike today, when we scroll endlessly on our individual devices, trying to find a companionship among the strangers in the virtual world.
How lovely. दूरदर्शन की तरह ही एक और जगह है जिसमें नॉस्टैल्जिया का बड़ा strong sense आता है. I'm thinking of Chandni Chowk, and you have wonderful poem on that as well.
Yes.
It seems that to stroll in Chandni Chowk is to be perpetually in the past,
Right.
as if it has no coordinates in the present, as if it exists now because it also existed some point in the past. How do you relate to Chandni Chowk?
Chandni Chowk evokes a lot of nostalgia for me, of course, and I've written a poem about it, because it was where my nani stayed after they migrated from Rajasthan.
Right.
So my nana opened a karkhana there, which was an embroidery workshop.
Right.
And for me, it means a lot of things. The food, for instance, there's, that the smell of that food. Particularly that Nagori halwa and the chaat and the paranthe wali gali. I remember going through that little paranthe wali gali.
Right.
And so today also, now that they've shifted from there, it still means a lot to me, because a lot of people still go there for wedding shopping, for buying tinsel, gotapatti, the silver jhumka, and the Diwali lights, and also food, which is very, very important.
Absolutely.
It evokes such beautiful memories, actually. So Chandni Chowk, I think, would remain. It's like straight out of Arabian Nights, and it's like the souks which are there in the Middle Eastern countries now. Only it's more chaotic. There's a lot of change. The Central Boulevard is much more beautiful now, but the chaos is still there, and one enjoys that chaos, actually.
It's like the fabled carpet which still flies and floats in air.
Yes, absolutely. And you this just so much against her feet of things. So you really you are so tantalized. I remember my mother, she used to whisk us away before we could point a finger towards something and we'll ask her to. So she was like a genie, so that we probably close our eyes and whisk us away before we could make any demands. But staying in Chandni Chowk had its own advantage. Now that we are so passionate about our me time, we keep saying that I am not getting me time. Neighbors are coming. This person is coming, and so there was a time when actually we didn't want that me time. Everybody's business was our business.
Neither with Chandni Chowk nor with Doordarshan.
Yeah. So I mean, I miss that, because now that we have plenty of me time, I really miss that community time.
Absolutely. You also have Neha ji in this anthology, Six of Cups, books on, also in her story, books on migrant workers, on women in Afghanistan. When you look at these characters, when you draw such vivid word images of these characters who are on the periphery, What resources do you have? Do you draw upon your academic and
Yes.
intellectual resources, or do you mind your experience of being a civil servant and working in the field and interacting with maybe people from such backgrounds on a daily basis?
On the Afghan women, of course, it is more academic because I've read some books on Afghanistan.
Right.
And I would not say that it is very different from what's happening in, I'm not saying politically, but
Right.
with women, in certain
Absolutely.
sections, still so much of restrictions are there.
Right.
So it's not like, it's not very different, but it is different, yeah. Thank God for that. So, but apart from that, migrant labor, of course, I have some experience because I had a talk with some of the laborers who were moving at that
Right.
point of time when it was Corona time. So they said that they talked about the antipathy of their landlords.
Right.
They said that we have worked for so long with these people, but now they want us away. So they moved, and this bad experience probably made them move. So that also brought out a lot of poetry in me because I realized that human beings are capable of stooping to such lows, and of course they are capable of rising to the levels of God.
Absolutely.
So I've seen that also during Corona. So it inspired so much of contrast, and it was done so beautiful. I mean, one realizes that human beings are capable of being gods also. I mean, so nice and so sympathetic and so empathizing.
In the introduction to her story, you say that the 39 poems somehow relate to the 39 years because you were 39 when you got this book out. How does the correlation work?
Of course I do. This is a story of every woman. Actually, we see discrimination at every level. Of course, times are changing. There is a lot of improvement. I would not say that it's exactly the same. But if you look at even our stories from mythology, we see, every woman suffering in some way or the other. So this is a story of everyone, including me. But my husband told me to tell everybody that to give the disclaimer that this is not my story because he would turn out to be the villain. No, of course. I mean, jokes apart, this is a story of everyone. And when I wrote this book, I was full of so much of anger when I heard people's story and reproduce these stories in the forms of poetry. So, yeah. And my second book, on the contrary, is a book on happiness,
Yes.
to enjoy, to celebrate the nostalgia. So I think 2 years have passed. So from anger to nostalgia, I think I moved.
Yeah. What were the feedbacks you got on this book, her story?
It was excellent feedback for the first book, and I was very grateful to Sahitya Academy for allowing me to publish my first book with them. And I really got a very good platform, and I'm very grateful to them. And a lot of people.
कोई महिला आपके पास आई ये कह के कि ये कविता मैंने पढ़ी है और
Yes.
ये तो मेरी कहानी लगती है.
Lots of them. In fact, good 2 years passed, and these poems I've been writing for ages now.
Right.
Because I remember the first poem from this anthology I wrote when I was in college.
Oh.
And the first major poem, which was on the theme of feminism, was when I was appearing for the UPSC interview.
Okay.
So that night itself, I wrote one poem which was on the female feticide called Devi.
And you wrote it the night before your
Yes,
exam.
yes.
Quite a risk you took.
No, it's a 10-line poem and came very naturally.
Yeah, there's a wonderful poem about Hidimba, and people have written a great deal about Hidimba. Narendra Kohli, the famous Hindi
Yes.
novelist, has a book on Hidimba. There's also a Bhojpuri novel on Hidimba. It's called Vanchari by a person called Ashok Dwivedi. Now, when we think of Hidimba, we think of the way people lived at one point of time in vicinity with nature.
Right.
Can we and must we rewrite, or should we retell Hidimba's
Yes.
story from an environmental point of view, because that's a major concern these days? Should we make Hidimba the kind of a mother goddess of
Yes,
nature?
absolutely. I think she is the mother goddess. I tend to see people in elements. So in fact, I'm trying to write a set of short stories
We'll come
in
to
which
that.
one of the, yes. But I tend to see people in various elements. So I think if one element that I have to give to Hidimba is earth, because she's nurturing as earth, she's life-giving as earth, and she also represents the forest, because earth also represents the forest. So I think she's a forest princess or mother goddess. She's all-giving, magnanimous, and we should understand rather than seeing her as an ogress, because I remember a lot of people who do not understand her importance. They think of her as somebody with whom Bhim had fun for a while, but they don't understand that if she were not there, who would have given asylum to Pandavas who were running away from Kauravas after the Lakshagraha? They do not see her as a caregiver or a somebody who would provide refuge. They were refugees, and she provided them the asylum, sanctuary. Also, she must be, because as all forest people are. I was once posted in Nicobar, and I remember they had such wide knowledge of the medicinal properties of the plants, and they used to apply those and used to get okay. So like all foresters, all people, tribal people who live in forests, they must be she must be a huge cornucopia of, I would say, the knowledge to heal. She would be a healer. Right. She would also be a very brave woman, and she would also be an environmentalist, because she would not be killing those animals for fun. It's either for hunger to satiate her hunger. She would not do it for fun, because they would be like her brothers and sisters. So it is very, very important to give her the right place. And also, she was magnanimous enough to later on, which I have not covered in my this poem. She later on, not only she gave up, she allowed Bhim to go away, and she then gave up her son, Ghatotkach, and her grandson to the Mahabharata, knowing they might not return. So who could be more giving? So this Vanchari, or this forest dweller, she had bigger heart than anybody else in Mahabharata, and she should be given her rightful place.
Absolutely. मैं चाहूँगा आप थोड़ा पढ़ें उस कविता को.
I would love that. So this is about giving the asylum to the Pandavas. So once they have settled and they have been here till the birth of Ghatotkach, we welcome them with folded hands, my lord and I, as the queen of this verdant forest gave asylum to the mother of five. Thus the Kshatriyas settled with us, with royal sophistication at bay, but at least they were safe here. My mother-in-law mulled each day. A year of unadulterated joy was this. The foresters loved their guests. And then little Ghatotkach arrived, to everyone's sheer delight. He had big almond eyes on the full moon face. The stoic grandma also beamed, singing lullaby with great tenderness. Wearing the tribal feathers, the 10-month-old moon-faced baby was fed with the first morsel as per the tradition of his dad's family. Why then, Bhim looked so sad as he came to me that night. His favorite mahua untouched, he just held me tight. The following day, they were to leave, the mother and the brothers five. And clearly the tribal mother-son duo did not belong to Hastinapur's high life. I wasn't the Kshatriya queen who would be so admired. My dusky looks and curly mops would jeopardize all that was desired. The five were a unit, like a close fit, and like a self-effacing wife, I must not resist. Wails of Ghatotkach, my silent sobs, and the wetness of Bhim's red eyes, none could move the steely determination, and the minute by minute, all hope dies. And then they left us on the cold Amavasya night, as my husband gave us one last glance in the earthen lamp's flickering light. Thank you.
Very poignant. There are quite a few poems in both the anthologies about the mother figure. There is Mandodari's Lament, The Unwed Mother, then there is Yashoda. Have we done justice to mother figure in Indian literature?
I think we have idolized the mother figure quite a lot, to such an extent that we have stripped her of all other qualities. We don't see her as a woman. And anybody who tries to be that woman, on the one hand, we are looking at a mother because she is definitely the most, she nurtures the most, I think. I mean, anybody, you ask anybody across the world, if they would tell you it is their mother who loves them the most. But at the same time, we should not forget that she is also a person.
Human being.
So I have written a few poems about that also, because I have written about postpartum blues. And in India, thankfully, people have started talking about it. So this is another thing, this is another aspect, because when the child is in, when the child is born, everybody forgets the mother. She is just considered her and udders for the child, like the milk factory for the child, and she's told by everybody that you don't eat like this, you don't sleep in AC, you don't bachche ko thand lag jayegi and all that, forgetting that she is also a human being and she needs that tender loving care for having endured the pains of pregnancy. But good that these things are being talked about. Also, I've also talked about there are various kinds of mothers. Some are strict, some are not very affectionate. So, like menstruation in one of the poems I've written, I've talked about how there's a contrast between the two mothers. One is a friend's mother who is happy, who is celebrating her coming of age, and one is the protagonist's mother, who could be anybody's mother, my mother also, who would say, don't touch this, don't touch that, you're impure. So these kind of stereotypes are also there, which probably our mothers are perpetuating and making us victims simultaneously, victims of whatever they suffered too.
But there's one absolute favorite of mine, Yashoda. मैं चाहूँगा आप थोड़ा उसमें से कुछ lines पढ़ें हमारे लिए.
Yeah, I would love that. Yashoda also happens to be my favorite poem, and I would love to read that. Won't you turn back and look, Kana, and see her tear-stained face, and the eyes that stonily stare at the dimming sight of your caravan? Won't you see those quivering lips, moving silently to bless you for eternity? Would you forget the touch of her scalded fingers that broke for you the hot bread into tiny morsels, and the sound of her jingling bangles as she churned out the frothy butter, the scent of her jasmine-bound hair you inhaled as she spun the fairy tales, the warmth of her hug on those moonless nights when the spooky monster chilled your spine, and the pearly white smile that grew bigger at your every big and small achievement. The courtyard chase in mock anger at the butter thefts and the neighborhood clamor, and the midnight spying by the omniscient mother as you stole away to sing and dance with Radha. Would you not think of her as you would fulfill your glorious destiny? Would you not think of her as you slay Kans and guide Pandavas on the chessboard of their tumultuous lives? Would you not think of her as you take 16,008 wives and prevent disrobing of Draupadi? Would you not think of her as you became the Narayana and come to be known as the incarnation of Vishnu? Would you not think of her as you herd your tribe to the resplendent city of Dwarka? And would you not think of her when you lay dying with an arrow struck in your heel?
How brilliant that poem is. Neha ji, finally, आगे क्या योजनाएं हैं? कौन सी किताबों पे अभी काम चल रहा है? आगे हम क्या पढ़ेंगे आपके द्वारा?
I'm trying to write, though being in work gives very little time to write.
Right.
But I've divided my work into 4 sections. So small haiku and senryu, I'm trying to write. So haikus, yeah. Right. I'm not really good at them, but I'm trying to learn from others. And then I'm trying to write poems on the incredible India, right, on that theme.
Right.
Another theme is the epic men and women.
And those, I would say, would touch upon India's history.
Yes, history, right, geography.
Right.
For instance, in this book, I have put Gobi Chettipalayam. I absolutely love that place.
Yes.
So I think I would love to talk about small places which are so beautiful.
Absolutely.
And India is full of them.
Absolutely.
So the third topic would be epic men and women.
Right.
There are many men and women in epics who have been marginalized,
right,
who have very little written about them. Like Nakul and Sahadev, we rarely find anything about them.
Absolutely.
I have no idea that how they were, very little actually.
Right.
So all those people who have no say, and all the famous people also who are very important. So probably stories from their point of view. And the fourth is on basically love poems. That is the most difficult one. But I realized that the one poem which really resonated with people in Six of Cups was a love song.
Absolutely.
And everybody wants me to recite that poem. So I realized that it is probably a beautiful poem and people love to read love poems, like probably 40 love poems of Neruda or something, absolutely, like that. So I was thinking that I should attempt that, but it doesn't come easy, definitely. Then I want to write a short story, a collection of short stories based on love stories across, that comes easy, that's okay, across time and zodiac. I'm very much into elements. I see people in the forms of elements, like somebody is earthy, somebody is, fiery, somebody is a combination of the two. So I like to see people like that. So that, and a children's book on Nicobar.
Oh, wow.
Car Nicobar, where we stayed. So I want to co-write it with my son. We have all the things in our head, but we're just not getting the inspiration to write it.
I hope you'll soon find the inspiration to write it, and also the time.
Yeah, I hope so too.
नेहा जी, आप हमारे साथ जुड़ी और हमसे इतनी सारी बातें की, इतनी शानदार बात की इन दोनों किताबों के बारे में, about the different shades of womanhood and motherhood, and about these characters from our epics who aren't perhaps celebrated enough,
Yes.
haven't got perhaps their due. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, viewers. I'm sure you've loved today's episode, and now you feel inspired to pick up books by our poet Neha Bansal and read them. To check out our previous episodes, go to Likhawat playlist on Sansad TV's YouTube channel. I'm your host Gautam Choubey. Namaste.